Mr. Enclosure.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to me, the registrar, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ouroboros. I did my MBA. I worked in corporate America. Then I chased what I thought would be the serious path: development economics, policy, the UN, and the NGO world. But somewhere along the line, I discovered something interesting. See, the UN is not heaven. NGOs are not temples. And juggling spreadsheets is not the same thing as doing real development work. Today, as you heard, I run a company that sells business supplies and technical solutions to corporations and US government agencies. And I'm standing here today speaking about human intelligence, artificial intelligence, meaning, and your future. So clearly, things have not gone quite as planned. Let me give you a short version of my trajectory so I don't stand here like the guy who has it all figured out. The truth is, I have had to rebuild my map multiple times over the past 15 years. I started with a familiar script: do well in school, get the right degrees, and land a respectable job. So after my MBA, I worked for ADP, a Fortune 500 company. And the business unit I worked for sat in between exchanges, stock and commodity in the United States, and the companies that were listed on those exchanges. I moved on to UMT, which is now part of Ernst & Young, one of the biggest consulting firms in the country. And I went to do consulting work with them. Essentially what we did was we helped big banks on Wall Street rank order their internal projects to ensure that their spend aligned with their corporate strategic goals. So on paper, it all looked interesting. It all looked sensible. This is what you do after business school. But underneath all of that, I had a deep desire to do more meaningful work. See, I've always been drawn to development, to the idea of building and solving problems in Africa. So I went back to school. I was accepted into the International and Development Economics program at Yale University. And while there, I explored some internship projects with the UN and 2 NGOs. And I found very troubling things. See, there was a lot of talk, but very little movement. There were tons of meetings about meetings, layers of bureaucracy. And so if you've ever been to the UN building in New York City, it's quite an impressive place. Tons of people zapping around, high energy. People are dressed up in their country attire. You get the sense that there's serious business going on here. But each time I tried to zoom in on moving the needle, the reason I was there, I realized that much of the buzz had little to do with the lives of people in the countries that these folks represented. That was my first crack. I realized in short order that the development world was not for me. Because I was coming from Wall Street where the culture is centered around deadlines and results. The gap was just too wide. That was the first crack in the narrative that I wove for myself. This is who I'm going to be. But in the middle of all that confusion, I stumbled upon the Yale Entrepreneurial Society. And then suddenly I was surrounded by folks who were not waiting for permission to do exciting things. These guys were testing ideas, building products, forming dynamic teams, failing, but adjusting, retooling, and redeploying. That environment did something to me. It made me move from the mindset that perhaps when I'm done with Yale, I'll join some think tank somewhere, or a corporation at a higher ladder, at a higher point, to the mindset that perhaps I'll just build a corporation of my own. I felt emboldened. And that's how Access Co was born. Initially, I was doing the same thing I was doing for my former employer, UMT, consulting work, helping. In this case now, it was mostly government, optimize their budgets. But then I had no HR, right? No steady salary, no benefits. Just myself, my laptop, and reality. Then something interesting started happening. As Access Score developed, I started getting contracts. But many of the contracts were not just for consulting. These folks were looking for products, supplies, hardware, software. So I did what any sane person without any warehouse and logistics setup would do. I outsourced all that stuff to third-party vendors that I had relationships with. And after a while, I noticed that these suppliers were making more money than I was. Same contracts, but I was getting a different slice. That was my second crack. I realized that the value may not be in the intellectual piece. There may be a whole business in actually supplying things. And that's how my second company, Colby, was born. Out of a very unromantic realization, you might say. The vendors who supplied me these products, they were doing just fine. So I leaned into that. And over time, Access Score and Colby have grown together, one on the services side and the other on the supply side. And this is the platform I speak on today. I'm not telling you this to say, look at me and follow my path. What I intend to do is to show how I, much like the rest of you, also began with a neat, linear circle, path. Right degrees, corporate job, develop your continent. And life broke that circle several times. Each time there was a crack when the picture in my head didn't map onto reality. there was always the temptation to retreat back to the haven of corporate America. But there was always the challenge to press forward and see what actually is possible. That's exactly where I think some of you are today, or will be soon. So I want to set some expectations about today. This seminar is not about the top 10 guaranteed AI careers to pursue when you graduate. And I'm not here to romanticize Nigeria's dysfunction, pretending that things will get better if we just prayed harder. What I hope to do is to help craft a different way of thinking about yourself in the middle of all of this movement. Nigeria, AI, and global competition. To build a map for moving from confusion to clarity, from the herd to an individual. And most importantly, perhaps discover a way to see Nigeria's limitations, or rather Nigeria's reality, not as a limitation, but a field of open opportunity to build something with the right mindset and the right strategy. So if this works out well, you should walk out here with not perfect certainty, but with a clear sense of who you are becoming and how AI fits into that. Shall we proceed? All right. The symbols before you represent something the Greeks call the Ouroboros. Has anyone heard that word before? It represents a snake biting its own tail, forming a circle. Depth psychologists like Carl Jung have found these symbols in different parts of the world. Traditions that never had anything to do with each other all featured this symbol in their mythologies. You see it in Egyptian drawings, Greek, alchemy, in the Indian Vedic traditions, in Chinese mythology. Virtually everywhere in the world you see something like this in their ancient mythologies. And for all these traditions, it represents a complete system, the cycle of life, and also a kind of enclosure of safety. A world that is already defined before you arrived. You don't create it, you're born into it. But you know, we don't have to go too far because it also features in West Africa. It shows up as powerful figures in Benin royal art, in the temples of Python at Auda. And for them, it's not just a random reptile. It's a symbol of guardianship, of boundary, of a force that encircles and protects their world. The psychologist Erich Neumann studied why this symbol kept showing up everywhere he looked. And he concluded that this is not simply mythology. It represents the psychological state of prehistoric man. The narrative that these people used to make sense of the world around them, including how they dealt with cracks. See, Neumann found that early man saw himself as continuous with nature. with the Great Mother, inseparable. Much like a baby doesn't think of itself as separate from its mother. When it's hungry, when it needs its diaper changed, all of that just magically happens. It doesn't need to think about it or negotiate the matter, it just happens. A baby's life was imbued with magic. Just like for early man, everything was imbued with spirit. I attended a lecture some 3 weeks ago offered by Vice Chancellor Zacharias Gundu. And very stimulating. He recounted the arrival of the Europeans in Africa and how our ancestors offered up their land and people in exchange for alcohol and mirrors. Now, this is true, right? We know this. But I wanted to add one layer on top of that. See, our ancestors did not think of themselves as owning the land they inhabited. They thought of themselves as owned by the land. So when the white man showed up with a contract for them to sign as a signal of forfeiting their land, they probably thought of it as more heretical, nonsensical, rather than a sacrifice of their own property. We are owned by the land, not the other way around. Aren't these people aware of the spiritual forces undergirding the earth? They probably thought. They may have laughed at the visitors' naivete. It turns out that their visitors were probably happy about that approach because it was like taking candy from a child. In the Americas, they had to fight with Indians who had bows and arrows. But in Africa, at least some parts of Africa, booze sufficed. Two different worldviews, two different circles, two different Ouroboros narratives about the way the world works, colliding. And today we now know who's laughing. The key feature about people who live inside these ancient circles is that you are not yet fully a separate I. You live in a state where your entire life is almost completely annexed to the group that you're part of, or to nature at large. Neumann describes it like this: everything issues from everything, and again enters everything, depends on everything, and is connected with everything. That's the Ouroboros circle. Like the story of Eden, where at first there was a kind of euphoric happiness, and then the apple is eaten, and then scales fall from the eyes. Self-consciousness is born. And of course, suffering begins. The same garden. But now Adam is aware of himself as separate from the whole. He becomes aware of his nakedness. What that really means is he becomes aware of his fragility. That's similar to what happens when a baby starts growing up. It finally realizes that its mother's might is not its own. That's quite a humbling experience. The journey from that unconscious state of early man to a conscious state that we take for granted today of I is a painful but necessary part of growth. But we all still sort of live in these kinds of circles. A modern way of looking at these circles. Your family, you've probably heard your parents say, this is who we are. This is what people like us do. Your religion, you're given a framework of what's right and what's wrong. Don't deviate. Your schools, you're told where to sit, you're told what to write, you're told what exam to pass. Culture, don't embarrass the family. Respect your elders. Follow the proven path. Career, you must do medicine, engineering, banking, and if you end up in oil and gas, shikana. I often imagine maybe an older Nigerian lecturer who meets one of his other students, older former students, and asks him, what do you do for a living now? And the kid says, I'm a content creator. It's like, what the hell is that, right? But he'll be surprised to learn that content creators, at least the successful ones today, can easily make way more money than folks occupying the traditional roles, banking, etc. That's one example of cracks in our system today, the old system, shifts that are going on underneath our feet that we have to react to. So you all made it to an MBA, congratulations. You're part of an educational and professional circle that most people dream of being part of. And there's nothing wrong with that, despite everything I'm saying. Because the question is not whether or not this circle is good or bad. The question is what happens when a degree becomes just one thing out of the many things it takes to be successful today. The question really is, what happens when this circle is no longer enough? You see, mythology has been wrestling with this problem for some time, with this question. And to explore this, we're going to move from Lekki, where we are, to a village in Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Has anyone read that book? I'm sure you've all read that. And I promise you we're going to get to AI soon. I'm sure you're wondering. We're going to get there. In Things Fall Apart, Umar here represented a circle. Life is held together by traditions, by rituals, elders, and shared beliefs. No one wakes up in the morning and starts questioning the system. Everyone just accepts. That's just the way it is. And then the arrival of Europeans, missionaries, a new religion, a new set of laws. You know, my mother used to tell me about when she was growing up. Both her parents had converted to Christianity, but her father used to sneak out at the dead of night to meet with his fellow townsmen. And her and her siblings would be curious, so they'll trail them. And when the men would realize they're being followed, they'll shoot them off to their mothers. But that curiosity lingered. And today I also wonder, what these men were going to do. Obviously, my grandfather and his townsmen were meeting to probably ponder on how things had fallen apart in their circle, how the center of generations and tradition was no longer able to hold. That was their crack. The moment when the old story could no longer explain the present moment. Psychologically, that's when consciousness wakes up. You can no longer say, that's the way it is. That's the way it is because it's tradition. The world is changing in real time, and we all have to follow suit. And many of you feel this right now. You look at Nigeria, at the economy, insecurity, Boko Haram, kidnappings. I can't even visit my village like I did when I was growing up. Something within says, this doesn't add up. All these cracks are quite overwhelming. And of course, beyond the crack is the unknown, what mythology calls the dragon. What was the dragon in Things Fall Apart? What do you think the dragon was? Of course, the new colonial order, right? Courts, which we never had. We had other ways of settling our problems. Missionaries, new centers of power. Umar here didn't only acquire a new neighbor, they acquired a whole new universe. It pressed firmly on the old one. And at that moment, everything shifted from the script they always knew. When everything shifts in such a way, that uncomfortable question, now what, becomes the real dragon. This is when the hero is born. I'm not speaking about Superman or any action figure. In myth, the hero is the one who becomes conscious. He or she doesn't sit inside the circle and whines about the dragon outside. He steps out of that unconscious state, that comfortable state that a circle puts you in. He confronts the dragon, the unknown. In our personal lives today, it's less dramatic, but it's just as serious. We confront dragons when we dare to be different from everyone else. We confront dragons when we take on roles that don't fit our family script. We confront dragons when we face our long-held fears and step up to give a public presentation. We confront dragons when we challenge something that we know deep in our hearts to be wrong, even when the stakes are high. We confront dragons when we turn down big corporate jobs to pursue our own path, our own dream. That's how you slay the dragon. That's how consciousness strengthens. In Neumann's language, that's the birth of the I. I'm now the one that chooses my own future. and I'm willing to accept the consequences of my choice. In myths, the dragon is always sitting on a treasure. So take, for instance, you decide to move out to a new city without any safety nets, looking for greener pastures. One of three things can happen. A, you can either fail and run back to where you came from. B, you can partially succeed and end up at par with where you came from. Or C, you could stumble on opportunities that tilt the scales in your favor. Where you came from is always a known quantity, but the unknown, as scary as it is, always carries the possibility of gold. And when the hero wins, he doesn't return as a child. He returns as a mature adult with gold, with wisdom, with stories with which he builds a new circle or renews the old one. So the pattern is simple. We compress everything I'm saying into one line. We begin in a circle, which represents unquestioned belonging. And that circle is met with a crack, which is a disillusionment. And the hero emerges, the I. And he returns to build a new circle, a chosen life. In our generation, the loudest dragon at the frontier right now is what? Thank you. AI sits on top of the chaos that we already know that Nigeria is. So let's talk about these two dragons separately. The good news is that we've been living with Nigeria for quite some time, since we were born. So we know chaos, we know cracks. Even without AI, we've witnessed and lived through political instability, wild currency swings, insecurity, NEPA. I don't recall a time NEPA was actually stable. I'm not young. Yeah, people talk about the 60s and the 70s, that's true. But it's quite possible that the sting of today is more acute than the sting of yesterday. I'm skeptical when people say the good old days, because again, this has always been the case as far back as I can remember. But the Nigerian dragon can be summed up in a phrase: systemic unpredictability. Of course, many of you came into this MBA program at a prestigious university because you wanted to mitigate the risks of Nigeria, put some structure on top of it, understand strategy, markets, give yourself a clearer path through the maze, rather than simply hustle and pray. That's a good way to fight the Nigerian dragon. But now, you have AI, the second dragon. AI doesn't politely knock at your door. It just shows up in your browsers and your smartphones. AI changes the value of professional roles. Tasks that once required senior analysts top lawyers, complex analysis, reports, research, things companies pay top dollar for, even today, are now automated, or at least heavily assisted. But the writing on the wall is clear. It even removes geographical walls. You're no longer simply competing with Lagos or Abuja or Port Harcourt. Companies are using AI even for their customer service. Don't be so sure that the person you're speaking with is human. AI is replacing old roles faster than governments are able to react. Even the West, the US is currently grappling with what to do about tens of thousands of truck drivers that will soon be replaced with Tesla's self-driving trucks. So now you're facing two dragons at once: Nigeria's reality and AI's intrusion. It can certainly feel like the cards are stacked up against us. When this happens, typically, people often choose two narratives, two stories. The first one being, AI will take our jobs, we're finished. The second is the fantasy story. AI will do everything for us, and we'll just relax. And it's likely that governments will have all this surplus automation that they'll begin to pay us some kind of universal basic income. You know, it's possible that will happen, but in Nigeria, I won't hold my breath. Both of those perspectives are incorrect, at least incomplete. The more accurate picture, at least the way I see it, is AI is an amplifier. If you're confused, copying what everyone else is doing, AI simply makes you more efficient and faster at being confused. But if you have some clarity, some judgment, some initiative, AI can give you leverage, can give you reach. So the real question is not, will AI save me or will AI destroy me? The question is, what kind of person will I be when AI meets me? What kind of person will AI be augmenting, be amplifying? That brings us to how people typically respond when dragons appear. Most tend to run back to the herd. A smaller group begin to move differently. Let's take a look at this difference. The herd versus the emergent self. When the world feels uncertain, the most natural response is, let me do what everyone else is doing. Friedrich Nietzsche calls this the herd morality. It's not an insult. It's a description of safety in numbers. For instance, if someone stood up here and starts screaming and acting erratic, the first thing each of us will do is what? That's true. But before you whip out your phone, there's a tendency to look at your neighbor and check in with what else everyone else is doing. We're subconsciously checking in with other humans, how they're reacting. This behavior is hardwired into our DNAs as primates. You don't want to be the only one running left when everyone is running right. So you always want to check where you stand in relation to everyone else. It's a natural response. We see the herd as folks react to the dragon that we face today in the form of Nigeria's volatility and, of course, AI. Anything that becomes trendy, anything that's popular, everyone else is doing it. Suddenly now everyone's a content creator or a crypto expert. People started relocating years ago. Now Jackpot is a very strong theme. Everyone has their eye on Canada. People copy curriculum vitae, cover letters, LinkedIn bios. But with the arrival of AI, this copycat behavior is quite risky. You can't be using the same prompts everyone else is using. It's the same AI generated phrases, the same top 10 career content, all these recycled things endlessly. And I get why people do that. Like I said, on the surface, it feels safe. Safety in numbers. But here's the problem. AI makes a generic output very cheap. If your whole approach is to follow what everyone else is doing, you're walking into a zone that's easiest to automate and easiest to ignore. This is not a moral judgment. I'm not saying don't be part of the herd, be special. What I'm saying is, in this environment, making yourself indistinguishable is bad risk strategy. When things are unstable, the herd is not where you want to be. When things are stable, yes, doing the standard thing, joining the standard firms, following the standard path works. But in the reverse, you simply put yourself in the just another one of those categories. And that's the category that AI will easily replace. You probably feel this tension inside. The herd pool, let me do what everyone else is doing, my friends are doing. But also a quieter inner pool. I'm actually drawn to this other thing. I see a problem that no one seems to care about. And it won't leave me alone. That quiet tension is important. It may be your own mind trying to wake up. It may be the beginning of your individuation. Don't ignore it. Let's take a look at what individuation actually means. What is individuation? It is the process by which you stop being just one more member of a group. And you start becoming a defined person. Not a perfect person, but a defined one. A person with a point of view. A person with direction. With a pattern of action that you're willing to own. It's important to say what individuation is not. It's not nobody can tell me anything. It's not quarreling with your parents just to prove a point. It's not trying to be different just for attention. Individuation is a quieter process, more serious. You're still connected to family, to community, to culture. But you are no longer psychologically fused. Now, why does this matter? Because here, with strong family ties and strong religion, yet real economic pressure, finding yourself can sound like a luxury. Something people in the West, more stable countries, do when they're comfortable and well-fed. But here's the paradox. Precisely because Nigeria is unstable, you cannot afford to remain internally undefined. The country is unpredictable. Technology is changing fast. And if you are still in this foggy state of mind, you have no solid ground. Individuation gives you an axis to at least stand and move deliberately amidst all the flux. Individuation is a searching loop of see, choose, and own. In seeing, you're essentially honestly observing yourself. You start by actually watching yourself. What really energizes me? What drains me? What problems do I keep thinking about? How do I behave under pressure? Not how I wished I behaved, but what I actually do under pressure. We're not always aware of that. We just react. Choose. When you know who you are, you take the right decisions. Not just remain in intention mode. You move from inner observation to outer choices. You pick a direction, even if it's small. You own, take responsibility for the feedback of your actions. If it goes well, what does it say about you? If it doesn't go well, how do you readjust and repeat? You can't control everything. You can't control dragons. But you can certainly refuse to live as though nothing depends on you. I'll just leave it up to the circle I'm from. This slide is just saying that once you're able to individuate, again, AI amplifies that. AI puts you in a different space. Rather than replace you or define you for yourself. A person who's amplified by AI is a person that has taste with a certain gravitas that others can feel. That's what individuation gives you. So now we move from self to strategy. Building a non-replaceable self. Up to now, we've worked through the inner architecture. Now let's look at some of how this translates in concrete terms. Let's start with what I call human leverage factors. Things that AI cannot replace, at least not yet. You don't need to master all of them, but pay attention to the one that stings. Might represent the one that you should work on. I hinted at the first one earlier, a reality check-in, kind of self-reflection, building a habit, or checking in with yourself, with your ideas, making sure that the things in your head map correctly to reality. No one knows you better than you know yourself, not your family, not AI, not yet. So there's this internal territory that still belongs uniquely to you. Be familiar with that. Know thyself, words of Socrates. Then validate your ideas with the data on ground. The second, judgment and prioritization. AI can generate 50 or 100 options for you because you're the only one that knows you well. You still have to choose what problems are worth solving. Which option fits your own unique values? What's worth investing your time and money in? That option or that decision still rests in your head. Judgment is the difference between being busy and being effective. And prioritization is how you turn motion into progress. The third, attention and deep work. The ability to focus on the demanding task for longer than an hour, 2, 3, without disappearing into the phone or being distracted. Early in my career, that used to be a problem for me. I'd have a litter of unfinished projects because I used to get attracted by shiny things, and I would leave the things that I was working on when they got too difficult. It wasn't until I started my own business that I realized I had to stick things out. There were many low points when the temptation, like I said, came for me to just decide to run back to corporate America, start something new. But I held on to one saying that I picked up early, which is, if you haven't had to sell the shirt on your back once or twice, you can't be a true entrepreneur. I never sold my shirts, but I got the point. I held on to my businesses through all the difficult seasons for 15 years and counting. That capacity for deep, sustained focus is a major differentiator. The fourth, skill stacking. I think we're now beyond the era of be an expert in one thing. That's not going to work today. That was good advice yesterday, but today it's risky. Competition is intense. Instead of being powerful at one single thing, you combine multiple skills. I'm not talking about being a jack of all trades. I'm talking about developing deep roots in at least 2 or 3 areas of specialty. Being a pro at business analytics, for instance, but also understanding what's going on in IT infrastructure. Being a guru of operations, but still having a solid finance literacy. In HR, I don't think anyone should be in HR without reading a psychology book. Because what else is HR? Human relations. And AI lowers the barrier today for the acquisition of skills. You don't have to get another degree or attend trade school. You can educate yourself at your own pace. The fifth is rich context and mental models. Read psychology, read philosophy, read history. I don't want to sound like an old parent, but read your books. Not just in your field. Reading outside your domain gives you a tremendous edge. I once saw a clip on the internet about a lady who attended a tech event with the Musks and the Zuckerbergs. And someone from the audience asked one of them, what does it take to be successful? And the response was, study physics and mathematics. You can't go wrong with that. But after that, during the schmoozing phase, the cocktail hour, The same Titan was asked, seriously, what does it take to be a billionaire? And his response, read psychology, read philosophy, know your humanities. You need to understand human beings, especially as the world gets complex. Psychology helps you understand people and what drives them, their incentives. Philosophy helps you spot shallow thinking and bad arguments. History shows you how patterns keep repeating. AI can drown you in information. So a good mental model can help you discern what's noise and what's signal. The sixth, social intelligence and communication. Know who actually makes the decisions wherever you go. Understand where informal power lies. Don't be deceived by flamboyance and inflated personalities. No. Real power is more subtle. AI doesn't read rooms. AI doesn't play office politics, thank God. But someone still has to navigate people, build trust, manage the human side of the system. If you can do that well, you become difficult to sideline. And then finally, take the initiative. Don't wait for the perfect instruction or perfect clarity all the time and deliberate things ad infinitum. Start a project with the information you already have. Fix a broken process that no one officially assigned to you. Test out small ideas instead of debating it forever. Tools are everywhere. What is rare is the individual that confronts their fears and says, let's do it. And when you put these leverage factors together, doors begin to open up for you. But these are essentially opportunities that exist right under our noses. Perhaps I'll just talk about one. Supposing you stacked your skills and made yourself something like an AI-enhanced problem solver. The person that companies call when things get messy. Notice I didn't say when IT gets messy or when marketing gets messy. When things get messy, a certain person that has a bird's eye view of an entire company's operation, that's someone who stacked his skill pretty intensely. There's an economics term for it called the Pareto principle, where 80% of the output is really driven by 20% of the input. That means is in every company, in every organization, just 20% of people are doing the real work, are pushing 80% of the productivity. You want to be part of that cohort, that 20%. Those are the folks that AI will not replace. So to conclude, we've covered quite a bit. We moved from mythology to psychology to strategy. We began in a circle: family, tradition, religion, school, career, all of which gave us structure in our infancy. But we see how the only thing constant in life is change. We see how change sends cracks through our circles. And beyond the cracks are the dragons, the unknown. And we see how many people in those circumstances run back into the safety of numbers. But only a small number of people begin that arduous journey towards individuation. I shared my story, obviously, because I'm not an outsider to this process. I too had my circle. I had my cracks, my disillusionment, and multiple times I had to rebuild my focus. And it wasn't always easy. I had many low points, like I said, the temptation to pull back. But I moved through uncertainty several times, made a few wrong turns, but slowly, today, I've been able to build something that supports me and my family. Now it's your turn. The question I want to leave you with is not which tool should I focus on or what area should I focus on. I deliberately made this presentation not about that. Those are valid questions, but secondary. The primary question is, who are you becoming in relation to all the chaos that you're walking into? A reaction or a person? An echo of the herd or a defined self? Will you be carried or will you be part of carrying something? A project, a team, a company, or part of this country. If today does nothing, I hope it pushes you to treat the next few years not as a cause of panic, but as a series of experiments on who you are becoming, what values you're creating, and how AI ties into that. So my invitation is simple. I highlighted 6 leverage factors. Pick one. Pick a door, even though I didn't go through all the doors. You can see me later if you wanted to discuss that. Or you can even use AI to generate doors, discover opportunities that suit your temperament. Craft a 6-month timeline where you actually work on yourself and improve yourself. So again, you don't remain wavering amidst the flux. And AI is only intensifying. Do this, let reality teach you, adjust, repeat, and one day you will wake up and realize that you're no longer simply a child in a circle, but a mature adult who's building their own circle for themselves and for those to follow. Thank you.